welcome to Almost 30 Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Lindsay Simsick and Krista Williams, and we're so happy and so grateful you're here.
Yes, we know there's a lot of audio listening you could be tuning into now, and we're so glad you chose Almost 30. You don't need to be 30 or any specific age to listen and enjoy the content. It was just the name we picked when we started the show 6 years ago.
We think about it now. We smile upon our younger selves who had no idea that it wouldn't age with us, but it's a mindset, truly. I feel like so many of us, if not all of us, are going through some sort of transition where we feel like, what the heck should I do? Or I should know more, or just frustration, doubts, fears. And we're here to just support you in those moments and beyond, and hopefully remind you you're not alone, that you have what you need to navigate it, and that leaning into community like we have here at Almost 30 is super, super important and very healing along the way.
Mm-hmm. We have a membership, we have courses and content, we have a blog, we have all the things, but overall, we love to pour our love and energy into the podcast. And today is a really special episode. We have Rich Roll on the podcast. Rich Roll and the Rich Roll Show is one of the first things I ever listened to when I started to get into podcasts around 8 years ago. And I'll never forget, I was living in New York City at the time, in Long Island City, to be specific, actually in Queens. And I started to listen to podcasts and it changed my life. I couldn't believe that I could, or there was a space for me to grow and evolve and just learn. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I felt so disconnected from learning, going to school, going to college, not really knowing what I wanted to do or why I was there. I kind of felt like I had to be there. It was something that I needed to do. So to find podcasts where I could educate myself and just be inspired by people's conversations or their interests or these experts, it just changed my life.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we started Almost 30, or right before we started Almost 30, you were talking about listening to the Rich Roll podcast and his show and just how interesting it was, recommending episodes. And that was really like my first foray into podcasting. And yeah, I feel like we talk about him often and really look up to him and how he has carried himself throughout his evolution of his show. And so today, admittedly, we were so nervous at the start of the day. We're like, Rich is coming to the studio.
Because it's a different situation when you're interviewing someone that you admire their work and you're a consumer of their work, but you're not like a fan.
Yes.
And I feel like because I had known about Rich Roll and the Rich Roll Show when I didn't have a purpose or a confidence that I have now. And so he was kind of like a guru for me. It was kind of like I had him on this pedestal. And so to come up and now be like, okay, now we have a successful podcast. We've been doing this for 6 years. We help other podcasters. It was very weird because it brought out that part of me that still saw him as like a guru or an expert or someone that like I was a fan of.
Yes.
I'm still a fan, but it's just a different energy when you admire someone as a peer and then when you're like a fan.
Yes, completely. We interviewed his wife, Julie Pyatt. You should definitely check out that episode. She goes by Srimati. But to have him here for this interview, I feel like all of the nerves kind of dissipated because his presence, when he walked in, because his presence is just so himself. He's very grounded, and I know that hasn't always been his story or experience, but he is just truly himself, and he makes anyone that comes into contact with him just feel really comfortable, you know?
I was thinking that when we were in our interview, I was like, oh, he has great energy hygiene, like very, very much in his own experience.
Yes.
You know, there's like an energetic of being worried about what other people are thinking or doing, but there's like a great energy hygiene of being in your own experiencing, being confident enough to tell your story. So if you came from Rich Roll's podcast, welcome. We're grateful to have you. I think this is going to be a really beautiful and hopefully unique conversation that we have together. We go into Rich's journey and the parts of it that we really wanted to pull threads on, like his marriage with Julie and their financial collapse. We talked about alcoholism as it relates to the Sober Curious movement. We talked about finding purpose and what that means. Can you find purpose? And we really picked apart the 12-step program in AA as it relates to a spiritual experience.
Yeah, this conversation is super dynamic, but flowed so well. And it felt like he hadn't been asked some of these questions. So it was actually really enjoyable to kind of be so present where he was.
To get him.
Yeah.
Got him.
But like, I could tell that he was just, you know, pausing at points and really just kind of feeling into what was true for him, which is refreshing, because sometimes I think people can just kind of regurgitate everything they usually say on podcasts, and he's incredibly present. So it was a really fun, amazing conversation. Rich, thank you so much for coming in person here to the studio. I know leaving Malibu's not easy.
I don't know if I'd do it.
I wouldn't leave Malibu.
And you'll also see our very pink studio. So if you're watching on YouTube or if you're on the internet, we have a very pink studio. We're growing out of it.
I was like,
we haven't been able to update yet. We were like, Rich, is this okay? He's like, I'm into it.
I was having like anxiety, like silly anxiety about like, oh man, Rich Roll's coming into there's like gold leaf on the walls. Yeah, there's like a bright coral couch. I'm like, is he going to be okay?
100%.
I'm like, relax. He's going to be all right. And it was great. So thank you. Make sure you tune into the Rich Roll podcast. It's an incredible show. And make sure to listen to our episode with his wife, Julie Pyatt.
Yes, you can go to richroll.com. Instagram is richroll, and then youtube.com/richroll. And Rich has a few books. One is called Finding Ultra. It was his first book that he just updated. There's The Plant Power Way, which is plant-based recipes he did with Julie Pyatt, his lovely wife. And then there's a new book out called Voicing Change. He has volume 1 and volume 2, where you can revisit the wisdom of some of the amazing guests that he's had on the show.
It's a nice coffee table book. I'm actually going to get that for my coffee table. Thank you so much, Rich Roll. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you. If you're new to Almost 30, make sure you subscribe so that all of our episodes every single week just drop into your inbox. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Almost 30 Podcast. Go to almost30.com to learn more about us, the show, and other ways in which you can get involved in the community and your own personal growth. I am at Lindsay Simsick on Instagram.
And I am at It's Krista, and we'll see you on the other side.
Bye.
I want to tell you about a skincare brand that has been making clean and ultra effective skincare for over 25 years. You might know them. You're gonna love them. I promise you. Osea. They use seaweed as their product's star ingredient, and they're vegan and climate neutral certified. I absolutely love this brand. They are award-winning. They have award-winning cleansers and serums and face moisturizers, and they're known for creating incredible body products. Let me tell you about my favorite product, probably of all time, the body oil. It's famous. You've probably seen it on TikTok, on social media. It is all over the place, and for good reason. It is a part of my daily routine. After I shower, it makes your skin look healthy, smooth, nourished, and glowing. And it's a perfect addition to my body care product routine as summer approaches. If you're anything like me, once I put on the shorts, the skirts, the wraps, the dresses, the bathing suits, I want to make sure my skin just looks and feels amazing. And I love the quality too. So sometimes with body oils, it gets everywhere. The skin doesn't absorb them, but this body oil is so luxurious. I know you are going to be obsessed. They also have the body butter. So if you're more of a butter gal or guy, this is softening, nourishing, and has the most amazing citrus scent. It's clinically proven to moisturize skin for up to 72 hours. So this is for those of you out there that have really dry skin. A little goes a long way. So find your new skincare and body care favorites at oseamalibu.com and get a special discount just for you, our listeners of Almost 30. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with promo code Almost30 at oseamalibu.com. That's OSEAMalibu.com. You'll get free samples with every order, which I love when I order from Osea. Free samples with every order, and orders over $50 get free shipping. You're going to want it all, I promise you. Go to oseamalibu.com, OSEAMalibu.com. Use the promo code Almost30. Father's Day is just around the corner, so listen up if you're like, what do I get my dad for Father's Day? Or what do I get my brother who's a dad? Or my friend who's a dad? Or my uncle who's a dad? You know, whoever's dad in your life, I have the perfect gift. At first, you might be like, huh? But trust me, this is something they will absolutely love and use and have for a very long time. It is from Manscaped. Okay. Manscaped is here to ensure that your dad, someone else's dad is looking like daddy material this June. Okay. I really, really recommend the Performance Package 4.0. This is a luxury grooming kit. Okay. It features the Lawnmower 4.0 and Weed Whacker trimmers. Okay. The Lawnmower 4.0 is an all new skin safe. This is trademarked by them. Skin safe electric trimmer so they can trim whatever they want. Okay. Let your imagination run wild. It is incredible and safe for them to use. A Weed Whacker, which is the ear and nose hair trimmer. I actually have one. I use it and I love it. So you can steal it from dad. It also has the Crop Preserver anti-chafing ball deodorant. I know, but it's necessary. Crop Reviver ball spray toner. Okay. This is another one that you don't realize you need, but you need. And the Magic Hat. This is disposable shaving mats because you don't want the hair everywhere. You know what I mean? So I recommend the Performance Package 4.0. But check out their other products. I think you're going to love it. I just love their products because they are cutting edge, they are durable, and they really, really work. Okay. So if you're looking to get your dad or someone else's dad something just freaking fantastic, unique, and very usable, head to manscaped.com. Okay, manscaped.com. Use the code almost30, get 20% off plus free shipping. That's 20% off with the free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code almost30. He'll be shaking the gifts his mama gave him. Yep, I didn't write that, but I kind of love to say it. Manscaped.com. Use code almost30.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. I actually met you at your book signing 8 years ago in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that bizarre? I was living in New York City and I just discovered podcasts, and your podcast and Tim Ferriss were like my go-tos, and they completely changed my life because I was someone that was in the corporate world. I wanted to find my purpose and my passion, and being able to like learn in the way of podcasts and being able to just be a fly on the wall for these conversations was so powerful for me. So I went to the Plant Power Way book launch.
Yeah, what
in
was
Brooklyn.
It called? Power. What was that place called?
Really cool. It was
venue.
Beautiful. It was like they had those steps.
Powerhouse, something like that.
Yes.
I can't remember what it was
yes.
called.
I remember. It's so crazy because at the point where you're not creating, but you're admiring the creators, you're just, your perception of them is so different. So I met you and Julian was just so starry-eyed. And then now to have a podcast is such an interesting thing because I feel like I'm a normal person and people listen to me. So I always wonder with you, because you did hit your stride later in life and you were someone that had this idea of the way that your life was going to go through law and through this like path that was perceived to be the way. What does it feel like when people approach you, or people feel like they know you, or this like celebrity ideal they have of you?
It's pretty surreal, as I think you can probably relate. I never thought I would be a public facing person, but the interactions are always really nice, and I think that's unique to the podcast space because the relationship is so intimate. People are walking around, with earbuds in. They're listening to you for hours and hours and hours. And so they project this idea of a relationship onto what they're hearing.
Yes.
And I know this to be the case because I've done it with people that I admire and listen to. But because of that level of intimacy and honesty and authenticity, when people approach me on the street or in airports, it doesn't happen so much in LA, but when I travel, it happens quite regularly. It's always really nice because they feel like they already know you. They're seeing you again, like, oh, hey, there's my friend that I just haven't seen in a little while. I'm going to go say hi to him. And I've never had, weird experiences for the most part, maybe an outlier weird thing here or there. But for the most part, it's always really nice. And people are always careful to not be overly intrusive. Like it's respectful.
Yes.
And so it's cool. It's a little bit different now with kids, though, because sometimes when I'm out with my kids, I always thought, oh, this is cool. Like my kid gets to see that like what I do in the world is
Yeah,
recognized and valued.
Mm-hmm.
But I've changed my mind on that because that's not the way that they see it. They see it as an infringement on their time with you and a distraction. And so when my attention diverts to talking to one of those people, like my kid will just be standing there like, when is this going to be over with? Like they're annoyed by it. So I'm a little bit more protective when I'm with my children than I used to be.
Yeah. So funny, like as a parent, you're like, they're going to think this is cool.
Yeah,
Nothing's
you quickly
cool.
realize, like,
Yes.
I always thought, like, I'm going to be the cool dad. I always know what the cool music is. I'm up on the fashion trends. Like, there is no way that I'm ever going to be, like, put out to pasture or past my expiration date. And what you learn
They humble you.
is it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
there is nothing that you can do that they will think is cool or worthy of their like
Yes.
appreciation. It's
love
rigged
that.
that way, and it should be that way.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like
Yeah.
kids remind you of kind of those ego moments, you know,
Yes.
they really bring you back to presence. And yeah, I have to agree, you know, we've always had that experience where people are just kind and it just feels like an extension of the intimacy that we create on the podcast, which is so nice. When you started the pod, you know, for us, it did feel like we were kind of meeting a level of our purpose. What did it feel like when you started the Ritual podcast?
I mean, there wasn't a lot of forethought or intention. I've been doing this for coming up on 10 years at this point.
Wow.
So I certainly wasn't one of the first podcasts. Podcasting had been around for a number of years. I think like 2007 or 6 or something like that is when it really began. I started mine in late 2012. So although, you know, the medium had existed for a number of years, it was really a wide open space where there wasn't a lot of super compelling content. A lot of comedians had podcasts, you know, Joe Rogan, Adam Carolla, Kevin Smith, people like that. But nobody was doing anything all that interesting in the health and wellness space yet. Certainly not in the fitness space or just in the kind of general growth expansion space. And I felt like maybe I have something to say about this or I could contribute. And I know a couple cool people. And I'd fallen in love with podcasting way before most people had, because when I was training for these crazy ultra endurance races, I just spent a lot of time alone on my bike or running. And I didn't want to do it in total silence all the time. And I couldn't just listen to music. So I discovered podcasts. And this was pre-iPhone, so you had to really want to listen to a podcast. If you, like, I had
Download
to
it.
download a whole bunch of them from my desktop computer and then bounce them to one of those big old clunky white
Yes.
iPods.
Yes.
And then, you know, rig a pocket to, you know, carry that around with me. But I just loved it. And I was confused why more people weren't listening to podcasts, because it was so nourishing to me. And I just thought this is like unbelievable. And I would talk about it to friends and they'd just be like, yeah, I'm not, you know, it's like, who cares, whatever. Like, no, I couldn't get anybody excited about it. But because I'd listened to thousands of hours of podcasts before I started mine, I felt like, you know, I had kind of figured out how to do this. So when I had the inkling to begin one, it was in the aftermath of Finding Ultra, my first book, coming out, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And it just felt like a cool, creative experiment. Now when people start podcasts, they have a whole strategy, they bank a whole bunch, they know how to release like a couple, there's like a whole thing that didn't exist back then. Like I just used my stepson's microphones because they're musicians. I spent a day trying to figure out how you get these things up on iTunes, which is pretty clunky. It's not that easy. And then thought, well, let's give it a try. And Julie and I sat down in a warehouse in Hawaii and recorded one. And when we were done, I thought, that was fun. Like, let's do it again tomorrow. I mean, it was really nothing more than that. And ever since, like, you know, just continued to build. And the show has grown gradually. There weren't any, you know, huge, crazy viral moments or anything like that. It's just been persistently showing up for it week after week after week. I've never missed a week. And, you know, it's grown into the thing that it is today. And the ecosystem and the audience has, you know, kind of come along for the ride. Like now podcasting is obviously very different than it was back then. It's a whole crazy industry that I would have never expected. And it certainly wasn't, you know, in my mind that this would be a vocation or something that could support my family. That's just been an added bonus of just following something that I was curious about and that I felt passionate about.
What did you feel like at that time? Did you feel like you had a purpose? Did you feel like you were looking for your purpose? Because I'm always so curious about that path when, we kind of lose sight of what we thought was our purpose, which is what something, that you did. And then you're in this space of looking for purpose, but it's not what you're perceiving it's going to be. Like the podcast turned into something that was very much a part of your purpose, but it wasn't something you were searching for. So along that path, for people that want to find purpose in their life and want to find a life that feels meaningful and feels like they can be themselves and they could be and express parts of them, what advice would you give for people looking to find purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about this. I mean, I think that purpose is really a function of engaging with your curiosity and following your instincts and your intuition. I bristle at conversations typically around purpose and passion and things like that, because those words I think are very triggering for a lot of people, because I think most people are walking around thinking, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't have a passion in my life, and they scroll through Instagram or TikTok and see all these people living these wonderful lives, and it just makes people feel bad about themselves. And I know what that feels like. I've been in that place. So the way that I think about it is, first of all, it's not a binary thing. Like, I don't think that you have one singular purpose or there is one passion, out there waiting for you to discover it. I think we can have many different purposes throughout many different phases of our lives. I've been around for a little while. I'm quite a bit older than you guys. And what I've discovered along the way, as somebody who has been in career paths that were not a fit for me, somebody who has had financial challenges and challenges with addiction and been in some pretty dark places, and now as somebody who feels very fulfilled in what they're doing, the purpose that I feel in my life and the passion that I'm privileged to be able to engage in every day has really been a function of the very thing I mentioned earlier, which is getting to know yourself, like doing the inside work so that your instincts are true, right? I think a lot of people are reacting impulsively to looping patterns in their mind and deluding themselves into thinking that they're paying attention to their gut or their instincts, when in reality they're not, because they're disconnected from that and they haven't excavated their pain and their trauma and done that kind of work to get honest with themselves and kind of clear a lot of that garbage out. So I think, whether it's therapy or meditation or 12-step or whatever your modality, being engaged in that on some level with great intention is critical in this journey towards unlocking greater purpose and fulfillment in your life. And when you're on that path, it's about being present with yourself and paying attention to what your emotions are signaling to you, being aware of the things that you're curious about. And when you get struck with a certain, kind of impulse to explore something or, engage in a certain activity, to really honor that. It's not about up and quitting your job and saying I'm following my passion, but just finding time and energy in your daily life on a micro level to cultivate and do some gardening around those things that you're interested in. And when you do that and you make that a practice, in my experience, the universe will provide opportunities to deepen that relationship, and that then leads to other things. And if you're self-aware enough and aware of your environment enough, there will be opportunities for you to further explore that. So it's not about lightning bolt moments or overnight successes. It's really about the tiny choices that you make every single day that move the needle in your life imperceptibly. Everything that I've accomplished is the result of things that I've been, working on for decades, not months or years. And so I'm always encouraging people to be gentle on themselves and to be patient and to not, set themselves up against some calendar to discover these things. And I trust and assume that your audience is, quite a bit younger than I am. And if there was a lesson that I would give my younger self, it would be to be patient, be more patient. And I think we all measure ourselves against our peers, and this person is doing that, and here I am back here, and I'm losing or I'm missing out, or, life has passed me by, and we tend to think of life as being short, and I guess it is, but it's also long.
I say that all the time.
Yeah,
I'm like, life is short, but sometimes I'm like, it's also so long.
I mean, when I was 31, I was in a treatment center thinking my life was completely over, and that everything that I had worked for in my life had been destroyed, and I couldn't see a way through that. So the fact that I'm sitting here at 55, I feel like I'm just beginning and engaging with life on on a level of, on a playing field that I never imagined for myself, tells me that anything is possible. And, the things that I've accomplished, I'm not that special. I just worked hard at certain things and, had the courage to do that inside work. And it has, created a foundation upon which I could build something meaningful for myself and hopefully for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you said, it's not the lightning bolt moment. I feel like we have been trained, whether it's by social media or just the world in which we're kind of growing up in, to look for these like quick hits of, dopamine or serotonin, or like just kind of those happy chemicals of like, okay, I'm going to know when it's the thing. I'm going to know it's going to be this moment that completely changes my life. And it's in those more mundane moments, and it's in those moments where you're showing up consistently that I feel like that's where the needle moves and the butterfly effect takes place. I'm curious, in those moments where you thought, this is it, like I don't really see the light from here, I don't see the way up from here, what was your, whether it was conscious or unconscious, like practice in the moment to be able to, in a way, and we've been talking about like holding the pose long enough to receive kind of the next insight or next feeling of, okay, this is kind of what I'm feeling is the next right step?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the tools that I rely on and that I have cultivated all come from being in recovery and what I've learned as a result of being a member of AA 12-step. And one of the many core principles is this idea of acceptance and surrender. Which is a very difficult, ephemeral idea to grasp, especially as somebody like myself who's very driven and ambitious and type A at times. The idea of surrender smacks of of giving up, right? Like I don't give up. Like I continue to work until I make it work. But what surrender really means is developing a healthy understanding of what you can control and what you can't, and realizing that in truth, we only can control very few things. The behaviors that we engage in, the way that we respond to the world, what comes out of our mouth, what we put into our mouth, like it's basically it. You can't control other people, you can't control your environment, you can't control situations. And as a recovering alcoholic, like that letting go of all of that provides a great deal of relief, and it provides a basis for being present with yourself and being honest with what it is that you can and cannot do or exert control over. So in those moments of confusion or despair or not knowing what decision to make or what direction to move forward in, it's about being present with yourself and then saying, well, what is the next best thing that I can do right now? Maybe it's to take a nap, maybe it's to eat a healthy meal, maybe it's to journal, tiny little things like that. That in the moment seem frivolous and like bullshit, frankly. But adding those up over months and years, I think is really the only way to get clarity on those things. And you're absolutely correct. It's not lightning bolt moments. It is the mundane. It's all about the mundane. And, you can look at my story or Google it, and it looks like there are these lightning bolt moments, like these inflection points where everything changed overnight. But the lived experience of those moments were just, oh, here's a little thing, like I'm going to pay attention to that, and I'm going to make this tiny decision, tomorrow morning, and then I'm going to make another tiny decision. And then 5 years later, it looks like this huge turning point in my life, but that's not what it felt like in the moment.
And it's interesting, one of those moments I know in your story is talking about going up the stairs. When you were like, I was going up the stairs and you were so unhealthy that it was like a wake up moment. And we even had a conversation with someone yesterday. She's like a spiritual teacher, and one of her moments was like in bed at night and a cockroach crawled over her foot. and it became her spiritual awakening moment. But you were talking a little bit about healing and doing the internal work. And I think, my perception is that in our community, which is mostly women, that's talked about quite a bit. Do you feel like as a man in your community, in your experience, that talking about doing the internal work is as popular or as normalized or as open?
It's much more normalized now than it was when I got sober. I can tell you that. And that's in no small part to podcasts led by a lot of men who are willing to be vulnerable and open and discuss their foibles and setbacks and shameful moments. I think that creates a permissive space for more men to engage in these kinds of discussions. To be sure, it's still the domain of the feminine for the most part, and most dudes just are raised in an environment and in a culture where certain expectations are set about what it means to be masculine. And packed into that, of course, is being stoic and not, demonstrating your emotions and not burdening other people with your problems, and holding the strong face and just taking care of business. But I think we're seeing a dismantling of that, and I have discovered for myself and in working with many, many other people over the years that when you have the courage to be vulnerable, and it takes courage to be vulnerable, I think that's a very courageous act, to admit your wrongs or to find somebody to discuss your pain, that is really not only a super healthy thing to do, but begins to repair whatever it is that's broken inside of you, so that you can become more fully actualized and grow into a healthy version of masculinity that can own your place in the world.
Yeah, and I feel like the actual willingness to be witnessed in that too is so healing. I feel like we've kind of experienced that within the community of women, where I kind of had a thing with like female friendships before, and just to be witnessed in a vulnerable state was so healing. So I can imagine that for men too, to feel like they don't always need to like hold and be a certain way, and to actually be witnessed as who they are.
Well, one thing, but sorry to interrupt, but one further thought on that. I think that a lot of men are locked down and they're holding a certain level of shame, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we're all imperfect. Like, we've all done things we're not proud of. And what I learned being in AA is, over many years, watching people get up in front of groups of people, big and small, and just tell their story with all its warts and everything like that, and not be judged, but rather embraced for the courage of the telling, is incredibly empowering. And beyond that, really, connects people to each other, because you're getting the real person. And I think through seeing that so many times and then learning how to do that myself creates a distance between who you are, like who is, Rich Roll, versus like, I'm the person who did these other things and then worked hard to, transcend them and, repair the wreckage of my past.
It's like parts. In internal family systems, it's like the true self, the true Rich, and then the parts of you that did this. Like, who is the hurt part of you that did this situation that you're sort of talking about? Yeah, it's so weird. Just growing up and learning about AA and the 12-step program, you're like, this is profound. Like, I just had ideas about it growing up. I didn't know what it was, but how spiritual it is.
It's a spiritual program.
Yes.
And that can be off-putting for new people who get freaked out about God, because I think a lot of people with addiction issues have suffered trauma at the hands of, their church or whatever denomination that they were reared in. So it can be problematic. It's not a religious program. It's certainly a spiritual program. But yes, it is divinely inspired in so many ways. I mean, the fact that there's no central governing body and that it has continued to grow and thrive for, decade upon decade, and the principles and the steps that are, that are part and parcel of what it is to be, a member of this group and be in active recovery, are tools that I think would benefit anybody. And I think, that's a broader conversation around what is addiction and who is an addict or an alcoholic versus a normal person. And I've learned that we need to define that that condition more broadly. Like we think of alcoholics as just, gutter drunks, and addicts as, people who have a needle stuck in their arm. But I think on some level we're all addicts.
Yes.
And I think, these devices, these supercomputers that we all carry around in our pocket is helping us all realize that, despite our best intentions, we find ourselves compelled to engage in behavior that doesn't serve us on some level. So whether it's the inability to stop scrolling, or continuing to get into a relationship with the same kind of guy or woman that isn't in your best interest, whatever it is, like we all have our own kind of cyclical, addictive patterns in our life that we feel powerless to alter or change. And I think thinking about addiction in that context makes the tools of 12-step, in my mind, like applicable and beneficial for anybody. I mean, basically, you're asked to, engage in this idea of surrender, and you do an inventory, like an inventory of your resentments, and a sexual inventory, and you get really clear on what your recurring negative behavior patterns and loops are, so you can begin to deconstruct them, and you learn how to make amends to the people that you've hurt. We've all hurt people, right? And that, when you clear all that stuff out, there's a sense of well-being and wholeness that starts to take root in you, where you feel like you're the person that you always wanted to be, and you have this sense that you can, continue to grow into that aspirational self.
Yeah, we've heard over and over just the power of AA, and I'm curious about your journey to sobriety. A lot of women in our community, people in our community, are sober curious, and so I would love to talk about just how your relationship with alcohol and now without alcohol has really amplified your connection with your soul, spiritual journey, because I think for us, I am sober curious as far as, a couple a month, and she is sober. So it has absolutely just opened a channel of sorts. And I'm curious, your thoughts as you've navigated.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was a mess.
You're like I had no choice.
Disaster.
Ours is like, we'll stop.
It was strongly suggested by a lot of people in my life that this was not working for me.
Yeah.
But I was a kid who was sort of awkward and insecure, and had challenges making friends, and didn't really know how to navigate socially in the world, and as a result was kind of a loner. I discovered swimming at a young age, and that was like a safe place for me, where I learned a lot about life and, how to, achieve goals and things like that. But it was also a defense mechanism that on some level, I suppose, prevented me from learning social tools that would be, valuable later in life. So when I went 3,000 miles away to college, because I was a goody two-shoes in high school. Like all I was doing was swimming and
Stanford
studying,
swimmer, lawyer.
And got into all the fancy
good.
colleges, and had a lot of judgment about people that were out partying. And then I went to college, and I just went insane, and just partied like a rock star, and lost interest in the more aspirational things that used to be my North Pole. And it was just kind of a slow decline. Like I knew early on that I had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but you can get away with a lot of stuff when you're young, and you're just, even if you're the last person to leave the party and the person who passes out and all that kind of stuff, it's like you can laugh it off because a lot of people are doing it then. But as you get older, it becomes less humorous, and the people that you used to hang out with are now building lives, and they're not available, and you start hanging out with lower companions until it's just you in your bedroom alone drinking, and it becomes very lonely and desperate and not sexy at all. So for me, it was many years to get to that point before I became like a daily round-the-clock drinker, and I was collecting DUIs, and became the guy who couldn't show up when he said he was going to show up. And my friends, were, doing other things in life and didn't have time for me anymore. And my family got to the point where they didn't want anything to do with me. It got really bad. to the point where I really had nowhere left to turn. I was sleeping on a bare mattress in a shitty apartment with no furniture and was about to get fired from my job, and ended up in a treatment center where I stayed for 100 days and was told early on, like after I was honest for the first time about how I was actually living, that if I didn't figure it out, I was probably going to die, and that my case of alcoholism was pretty advanced, like along the lines of what they typically see in like 65-year-old lifelong drinkers. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I was this person who thought myself to be smart and upwardly mobile and very privileged and had all these incredible opportunities that I had squandered. And I was very ashamed of that. And I realized, like, I'm in a mental institution. Like, all my thinking, me thinking I'm this smart person, ended me up here. There's something wrong with my thinking, and I need to get this right, because I don't ever want to come back here again. And I took recovery incredibly seriously. It was my number one priority. It remains my number one priority. But at that time, it was like 100 days in rehab, 2 meetings a day, commitments, sponsor, steps, like the whole thing. Like, yeah, I had a job when I came back, but my real job was creating a foundation of sobriety. And that has paid off in helping me to, not only just repair all my relationships and become like a responsible member of society again, but to really get whole with myself. And so in thinking about people who are sober curious, maybe you don't relate to that because my story is extreme, although it's pretty mundane in the context of AA. I mean, most people have much worse, tales of woe to tell. But I've seen people come back from the depths of despair to live amazing lives. Like, it's really miraculous. But I just think that, the lesson for somebody who's sober curious, in my case, because I'm not here to give advice, I can just share my experience. My relationship with alcohol was so interwoven with my insecurities and my sense of less than, and my inability to just be comfortable in my own skin, so that I could go to a dinner or a cocktail party or walk into a store and look somebody in the eye and ask a question or say hello, particularly with respect to the opposite sex. Like, I could not talk to a girl unless I had at least 3 or 4 beers in me. And that became like a crutch, in that if I wasn't drinking, I became completely incapacitated to like be a social person. And so alcohol taught me, like, I have to say, like, it was the solution to my problem. Like, it works, right? So I could go to a party and talk to a girl and flirt and tell a joke and feel like, hey, I'm having fun, and like, this is the way I'm supposed to feel all the time. This is the way I always wanted to feel, until it turns on you and it gets dark. So to the sober curious person, like, be honest with yourself. Like, what is the alcohol doing for you that you feel like you can't do yourself? What is it that it's masking? What is the emotional pain that it's covering up that you don't want to look at? Because the real opportunity is to do that inside work. And when you remove the alcohol, in my case, losing my best friend, I became a live wire of all kinds of confusing emotions that suddenly were percolating up, that were forcing me to have to reckon with them. And I didn't have any tools for doing that. Because sobriety isn't just abstinence, it's emotional sobriety. It's like learning how to manage your emotions and create new behavior patterns to manage that sense of dis-ease within, so that you can grow into a person who's truly comfortable in their own skin. And it's a lot of work, but I am comfortable in my own skin now. I don't have to, when I walked in here, I didn't have to be scared, of having to talk to you. Like, I'm like, I can do this, know?
Yeah.
But there was a time where, if I had to walk, I would have been terrified. I wouldn't have been able to do it. And I think because alcohol is so widely approved of, nobody bats an eye at it, even when people are drinking excessively. It's sort of like, okay, maybe that person drinks a little bit too much, but who cares? So really look at that. Is it in service of you, or is it a barrier between the person you really want to become and the person you currently are?
Yeah, it's almost like with drinking and then with the phone, like, I feel like all of us know we're addicted but don't want to admit it to each other, because then we have to do something about it. And
yeah,
we're
God
like,
forbid.
yes, honestly, it's like, I remember your episode with Cal Newport. We had Cal on too, was like so profound in talking about that addiction. And your story sort of reminds me of that, because I feel like we're all at this precipice of being so addicted to our phones. How do you sort of reckon with, like, this is something that I think about a lot, being people that have podcasts, we're in people's ears all the time. We are in conversation with people, but we also want our audience to listen to their own heart and their own gut and their own intuition. So how do you reckon with being someone that, like, is very influential in people's lives, but also wanting them to follow their own path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would begin by saying that I wish when I was in my 20s or early 30s that there were podcasts out there where I could just learn about other people's lives, or listen to somebody who was doing something that I aspired to do and hear them talk about how they made it happen. Like, what an incredible gift. Because that didn't exist when I was coming up, and perhaps I would have saved myself, 10 years of chasing the wrong thing. So I think that, podcasting, audio in general, plays a huge role and should be respected, but be wary of making anybody your guru. You know what I mean? It's really about you, and you can inform yourself by listening to lots of different voices, taking it all in, trying to figure what you listen to could be of service to you, but ultimately you have to make that decision for yourself. And so it's a broader question about how you're living your life. Are you living it for yourself, or are you living it to figure out how to fit into somebody else's expectation of who they think you should be? Because I've been that guy too, and I know what that's like. And when you're doing it, you don't realize that you're doing it. You think you're doing it for yourself, or it's what you want, because you haven't done enough work to realize, like, oh, I actually made this choice because this is really what my parents want to do. Or if I do this, then I can afford to lease that car, or whatever it is. So I think it's again, it always goes back to the inside work. If you're not doing enough inside work, you can be overly influenced by something that you hear in a podcast and think that you're making a conscious decision for yourself when you're really just being reactive.
Yes, 100%.
You become a better gatekeeper of what is for you and what is not for you. I feel like you, or us, like you, love to listen and just soak up information, but there's often times where I'm like, that's not for me.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the point of inflection, as far as like really being able to attune to this centered feeling of like, I do recognize when it feels resonant to me and when it's not. And I think that's hard to do in the world that we live in now, because there's so much information. We're scrolling so much. We're getting little flicks of everyone's life constantly. So it's that practice of tuning back in.
On top of that, I think it creates a paralysis. We were talking before the podcast about how many self-help books there are,
So true.
So you can spend all your time reading self-help books and listening to podcasts, and there is some kind of brain chemistry at play that convinces you that you've actually done something when you actually haven't done shit. You haven't done anything, right? So ultimately you have to take an action rather than delude yourself because you're listening to all of this or reading all of this material that it's moving you forward. Like, you scroll through Instagram, you see an inspirational quote, you're like, that's an amazing quote. And then you feel like you accomplished something. Like, you didn't do anything.
I think
right?
about like I
So-
saved it time.
Yeah.
I reshared it.
Right. Well, yeah, but what did you actually do? And getting honest with
Yes.
yourself about that. So it's about filtering that information. And I think journaling is a good practice for developing clarity, especially when you don't know. Like, I know for myself, when I'm not sure how I feel about something, like, I'm not a person who hears something and immediately knows how I feel about it. I have to write about it. And in the writing, my clarity is revealed. So I think that's a good practice. But ultimately, that can be paralysis too, because you have to translate that clarity that's developed through practices like journaling and turn them into, like, what is the action that you're actually taking out in the world? Like, are you picking up the phone and making that call? Are you making the appointment to do the thing, or, rewriting your resume, or whatever it is? Like, all of it has to translate. Otherwise, you're living in some level of denial, I think.
I always think about that with like the quotes on Instagram or the graphics. I'm like, this quote would take a lifetime to understand and learn and apply. And we just are fed so much of the personal growth, self-development information all the time that it's like you read it and you do feel like, okay, I read this quote, and then you kind of move on. But so much of it is lifetimes of like work to learn and to apply all of these things. Something that I have always loved about your journey and what you share, especially as it relates to Julie, and I always felt was so fascinating for me because I saw my parents who really struggled on the conversation of money. And so when you went through your financial collapse, just having Julie as that anchor for you and having her as that, like, you know, that pillar has always been so inspiring to me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial collapse and the importance of having someone that was holding the post for your family.
I mean, incredibly important. I would not have survived that period of our life without her conviction and strength, you know, and I can't overstate that. So for many years, we went through, you know, an incredible period of financial hardship. And the irony being that we live in a beautiful home, but we couldn't pay for it. Like, we weren't paying our mortgage. So on the outside, it kind of looked like we
Very LA.
had everything going on. And, you know, meanwhile, we had a couple cars getting repossessed. It got to the point where we couldn't even pay the waste management service the $80 to keep our trash cans. So they took our trash cans away, and we didn't have the money to get them back. So we would put garbage in the back of this beat up minivan that we had and look for bins, like look for, you know, those big industrial bins around that we could dump our garbage in. So the minivan smelled like garbage. You know, we had to go, you know, we didn't have a washer and dryer. Like, just, it was not great. And as a dude who has children and is living in this home, like, that, there's a lot of shame that I harbored over that. Like, I'm supposed to be the provider, and I'm the one who went to the fancy school and was this lawyer, and now I'm out, like, riding my bike and doing these other things that don't seem to make sense. And even to the point where I got a book deal and was paid a pretty good amount of money to write that book. But when you have a household of 6 people and those checks come, you know, once every 6 months or something, because they pay those advances out over time, like, it wasn't enough to pay our bills. And even in the wake of the book coming out and doing well, I still didn't have a career path where we were making any kind of consistent money. Like, it didn't make sense. It wasn't rational. And so my faith was tested many times. My shame was, like, you know, just on the surface all the time. And there were many moments where I would say to Julie, like, this is insane. And everybody's telling us we're insane also. Like, there's the cacophony of, like, you know, your friends and your colleagues who are witnessing this car crash and saying, what are you doing? Julie, why are you married to this guy? What is he doing? And I would say, I should just go back and find a job in a law firm. Like, I cannot tolerate the pain of this situation one day longer. And she would always say, like, that's the past. We have a different future. We've come this far. And we just have to have faith that something will work out and we will be provided for. And that's, you know, easy to say and hard to live. And so it was really challenging. It was very difficult, but it was her strength and her conviction and her deep, profound faith in the unseen that gave me the strength to show up another day and continue to pull the threads. And it's not that I wasn't doing anything. I'm sending out emails and I'm trying to get a speaker, get anything that could bring any kind of money in. And the irony being that now, like, I mean, a lot of that, some of the, within the shame, how do I say this? Like, so within all of that shame was also an unhealthy knowing within myself that I would never be financially solid. Like, out of college, even when I had good jobs, like, I was running up credit card debt, and as an alcoholic, you don't pay attention to finance. Like, I was always in debt. I was always behind. I was always late to pay bills my entire adulthood. And so I didn't have a history of being solvent or a sense of my own innate capacity to be, you know, financially healthy. And I didn't believe that that was possible in my life. And it took a lot of work overcome. I think that's a lot of people, like they just feel like, well, I'm not worthy of making money. I'm personally not worthy of it, and it eludes my capacity to manage this. And so we developed this poverty consciousness that I definitely had. And it took a lot of work to overcome that. And many, many years. Again, it goes back to the patience thing. And all the evidence was that I was correct. Like, look, I can't even pay to keep these trash bins here. Like, you're a piece of shit, you know, and I would beat myself up. And it was always back to this faith piece. It was always back to Julie's strength. It was always back to doubling down on the recovery work and the 12 steps and being very active in that program that kept me alive and getting out of bed in the morning and just putting one foot in front of the other, like having this belief that we didn't go through all of that just to be completely decimated, because our intentions were true and we were working hard. And that belief allowed us to continue a lot longer, I think, than most people. And it's crazy now because I'm making more money than I ever thought possible. It's banana. Like, I never did any of this stuff for money. I've never been motivated by money. I've just followed this thing that I find valuable and other people seem to find value in, and I'm being rewarded for it now on a level that I never thought possible. But I promise you that I was the person who thought I'm never going to have a dime in my life, and was deeply, deeply ashamed of that. And there was one other point I wanted to make about that, which was, what was it? I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah.
I'll interrupt you when I think.
Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect. Please do. Yeah, I just think it's so powerful to have that experience with a partner where they see something in you that you have never or just haven't recently felt within yourself, and to have that constantly reinforced and reflected is just so powerful. And I just, I find your relationship, what I know of it, which I know is merely podcast episodes and sections of books, but to be so refreshing in the sense that you both are very, very much individuals and cultivate an intimacy that is, from my perspective, not codependent. And you allow each other to grow and evolve and progress in the ways in which your souls are meant to, without holding each other back for fear of moving on or evolving past. So I'm just curious, like, from your experience, what that's been like to be with someone like Julie Pyatt.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel so blessed that I found the right person. And we are very different. The point that I was going to make earlier was the crucible that we were in, I think, would have blew apart most marriages. And ultimately it brought us closer together and our family closer together. And that took a lot of work because the pressures were so severe. But Julie has this gift for being able to identify the potential within another and to hold that space and that belief in that person's ability to actualize that thing, even when that person can't see it. And she has done that for me. She does that for our kids. She does that with other people that she works for. And it's incredibly empowering, because I think most people would just say, get your shit together and come and talk to me when you figured it out, but I don't have time for you right now. So for her to be able to hold that, I think requires a lot of strength and makes her a very unique person in that regard. And yeah, we are very different. We complement each other because I'm wired, I'm like logical and practical and organized and methodical, whereas all you have to do is look at her desk and my desk, and I've said this on the podcast, like everything is perfect, like my pencils are all perfectly aligned and everything like that, and hers is a tornado. And I'm like, you should see or look at our like laptops, home screens, and it's like hers is like 1 billion documents, and I was like, how do you find anything? Like, how I could not, or open our refrigerator and it's a mess, and I'm like, how do you live this way? I don't understand it. But she is able to, she finds, she's interested in what's most important. Those things aren't important. And she's doing a lot of things at once, whereas I'm like, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. And I think you need a little bit of both of that, to make things work. And it's not that we don't fight. Like we because we're so different, we'll butt up against each other. But our arguments have a very short half-life because we both have the skills to work through what it is we're actually in conflict over and get to the other side of it and walk away without any kind of, emotional residue, which I think is really important too. It's
Very
like,
important,
it's not about not fighting. It's about like learning how to fight properly and developing the language skills, the presence, the emotional intelligence to know how to resolve conflict.
How long do you think it took you to learn that in your relationship?
I mean, I'm not saying I have it figured
I
out.
know.
I'm still
What's the
learning.
thing you say?
Yeah, honestly, I was like, what are the exact phrases?
Well, I mean, one thing is never storm away in the middle of a fight. Like I've learned I just will not leave, and I won't let her leave until we sit there and we get all the way through it to the other side, no matter how long that takes. That's been really instrumental, and that's like a very tactical, good takeaway for anybody. Because when things get hot and you feel like you're out of control, you want to just storm out, right? And maybe there are instances where that's appropriate because you don't want to blow up and say the thing you can't take back. So there's some work that has to go into being the person who won't do that, who can just sit in the discomfort and find a way to calm yourself and work through the dilemma, the problem, to get to the other side.
Yeah, it's that co-regulation. And that's what I realized even in my relationship. It's like we would regulate outside of being together. So we would kind of have the fight and then go away and then regulate ourselves, either him by himself or me with friends, and then we'd come back together already regulated. And you're missing so much intimacy when you're regulating outside of your container and your relationship. And it's like, how can you feel safe enough to stay and regulate together?
Sure. The problem with that, though, and you probably have experienced this, is when you separate and you each go to your friend group, your friend group's getting one side of the story, and they're going to tell you how right you are. He's terrible. How could he do that to you? You need, and so you get armed up with all of this support that is really, perhaps not completely helpful.
Completely agree.
Because then you can come back and each side is like, well, so-and-so told me this.
And you could even hear, like, if I'll start talking and it comes out, it's not my voice. Like in a fight, I can hear someone else's words even come out and it sounds different. The words kind of sound different coming out of your mouth. And so we're working on not really doing that because it can be, it can be unhelpful for the relationship. And then you're not really showing the true you. And by staying with having kids, you have 4 beautiful kids and your relationship, how are you sort of modeling to them a real life and realness and truth, and that sometimes is messy and hard and doesn't look perfect, and it's like the everyday granular unsexy stuff, and then also like the ideal life that you would want them to see and experience?
I think it's a combination of transparency and honesty, like not trying to shield them from challenging moments or difficulties that we're trying to weather, but bringing them into that equation to some degree, depending upon how old they are, while also simultaneously making sure that they feel secure and taken care of. I think the mistake with transparency and honesty is it can make a kid feel unsafe. Like, these people don't know what's going on. Like, I'm going to have to fend for myself because they don't have my back.
100%.
So they have to know that not only do you have their back, that their needs are going to get met and their needs are a priority. But within that construct, assuming that is locked in, it's okay to be like, I don't know the answer to this, or we're having this issue. Like the way I was, I think we all kind of parent in opposition to the way our parents, parented out, because we look, they didn't do this, and I'm going to do and then we swing the pendulum way too far in the other direction. But for example, like my parents never talked about money, so I never learned how to balance a checkbook or what it means to have a credit card or what is a mortgage. Like I don't, I never learned any of that stuff, and certainly you don't learn it in school. So then you go out in the world, you make all these mistakes. So with our kids, it's like, well, here's kind of where we're at. We got to watch it for the next couple weeks because, we're not getting paid until this date. And so we're not going to do Postmates and Ubers, and we're going to go to Trader Joe's, and we're not going to go to Whole Foods for then. And that's just the way it is. Like, rather than being like, don't worry about it, and not, so I think
then your energy is telling a different story too.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, being appropriately vulnerable, I think is important. So because they see it anyway, right? So either you're putting up a front that they can see through, and then that dissolves the trust that you have and makes them feel less safe. So I think it's important to be honest, and it's not like, oh, we're going to hide all this stuff from our kids and just pretend like everything's okay. I think that's a mistake. But there was another piece to your question, though. What was the other piece that you were asking? Because I had a thought on that.
Yeah, it's like, how do you stay in an authentic relationship with your kids, but then also have like an ideal standard that you want to be as a parent?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of spoke to that, but the other piece that you were getting at was, helping to shape them into these people that, you think that they can be. And, I, as somebody who's down the road on the parenting thing, like Tyler just turned 27, wow. Trapper's 26, 25, he's about to turn 26. And I'm not their dad, I'm their stepdad, but I've been in their lives since they were like 4 years old. I'm always entertained when I meet new parents who have like a baby or a toddler or just a young person, and they're like, here's what we're doing. They're going to go to this school, and they're going to go to this school, and we're getting them involved in this and that and that, and this is how it's going to go, and they're going to be super into this, and they've got it all mapped out. And I'm just like, yeah, well, good luck with that.
Let me know.
Because
so true.
If there's one thing I've learned is that children don't come from us, they come through us. And they are their own unique people. And certainly environment helps shape that. But there's a lot about the way they come into the world that has nothing to do with you. And they have their own ideas of the things that they want to do. And certainly you want to set them up for success and plug them into lots of activities and expose them to as many things as possible. But you're there to kind of be responsible for them, put the guardrails up, to rush in and try to support them when they show an interest in something, but not to dictate who they're going to be in the world, or be frustrated when they show an interest in something that isn't the thing that you would have them be interested in, or be upset that what they choose, wasn't part of the plan. And that can be challenging, I think, for a lot of parents. I mean, my kids are all super different, and every time I think I've got a lock on this parenting thing, like we just get a crazy curveball thrown at us, and it's like, holy shit, like I don't know anything. Like, what are we doing here?
Yes.
So
how do you
the wheels are flying?
How do you come together with Julie? When there is a situation where perhaps you have different perspectives or ways in which you would handle it, and how do you decide which way you're going to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's an ongoing thing. I mean, I think, when I'm not my best self, I end up like projecting a lot of fear and worry. And that's patterning that I learned as a young person, the way that my mother parented me. And I've done so much work to overcome that and transcend that and be a very different kind of parent. But when I'm off my game, like I will default to that. And Julie has she'll be like, you're doing that thing again. Like, don't project this onto the kid. Like, the solution is always more love. And she always has a belief that, that is the path forward when we're in a difficult situation. Like we just had a situation where our youngest wanted to go to a particular school. He didn't get in. Now we have to figure out a plan B. And we all thought that this thing was going to work out. Like all the evidence was that it was going to be fine. And it turned out to go a different way. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? We got to figure this out now. I need to, and Julie's like, it will be fine. Like he's going to be fine. This is emotional resilience that he's going to have to develop. And she, like, just by dint of her ability to remain calm and neutral, I think is a superpower that, is very difficult for me.
So I am in the early stages of just being more mindful, more thoughtful about supplementing prenatally. So I am not pregnant yet, but I just want to make sure that my body is, set up for optimal growth of a human being. So I found this brand because I saw so many soon-to-be mamas that I know out there using this brand. It's called Needed. And this is an incredible company that I feel like y'all need to know about. They have incredible supplements, they have proteins, and they just really, really care. Through nutrient testing, they realized there were very, very significant nutrient deficiencies in soon to be moms and people who, before they conceived, and food alone wasn't meeting the needs of the mom and the baby. So, through this process, they discovered the moms were deficient in omega-3 and other key nutrients for fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum well-being. So they dug into the research and they created an incredible line of supplements and products that really set a woman up for optimal nourishment. So I wanted to give you an example. I got the complete plan, which I really love. And I want to tell you what's in it. So in it is a prenatal multi. You can get powder or capsules. I got the capsules for this one, but they tested thousands of mamas everywhere, their nutrient levels. So they really got to the bottom of what is needed. And it includes 24 optimal vitamins and minerals that mamas and babies need. So you can take before, during, and after pregnancy and even beyond. It also comes with an omega-3. It's an easy to take vegan omega-3, DHA, and EPA, choline, lutein, and zeaxanthin capsules. And it has a really, really pleasant taste. So sometimes the omega-3s are gross, but this is great. It also comes with a pre and probiotic and also comes with a collagen protein. So this is hydrolyzed and ethically sourced from the hides of grass-fed, pasture-raised, hormone-free bovines from New Zealand. Most women aren't meeting their protein needs during pregnancy and postpartum. Mamas need protein for blood sugar management, minimizing nausea, and growing baby cells and the placenta. It's an optimal form of so many things within the body. It supports the joints of the mother, the pelvic floor tissue, the skin elasticity, and postpartum hair and healthy growth. So before, during, and after pregnancy, this is incredible. So I'm really excited for y'all to try Needed. If you are thinking about getting pregnant, if you are now currently pregnant or even postpartum, I absolutely love the brand and I'm loving taking these. I'm feeling super, super good. They are known for their complete plans for both men and women, by the way. And I want you to check it out. All right, go to thisisneeded.com. You're going to use the code almost30 for 30% off your first order. We rarely get that 30% off, and I need you to take advantage. Thisisneeded.com. Use the code almost30 at checkout for 30% off your first order. I recommend the complete plan. I'm here for any questions. DM me. And This Is Needed is also an incredible resource. So please reach out to them as well on Instagram. You can find them at Needed. So go to thisisneeded.com. Use the promo code almost30 for 30% off your first order. If you are investing in things like beauty regimens and really good food for your body, but you're not investing in the nourishment for your mind, like therapy, I highly, highly, highly recommend that as your next step to just optimal well-being. I personally feel that therapy has changed my life. I've been in therapy for 3 years. Right now I go every other week, and it is just a grounding cord in my life and a great place for me to process, to feel, to just understand the truth of what's happening, to really peel back the layers on my experience and what I'm learning. I could not recommend enough. I always recommend BetterHelp to people because it's customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with a therapist. So if you don't want to see anybody on camera, or if you don't want to see anybody in person, this is for you. And it's much more affordable than in-person therapy. And you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours, which is great. And if you're not feeling your therapist, they make it super easy to change. Almost 30 listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/almost30. That's betterhelp.com/almost30 for 10% off your first month. Amazing. Go right now to betterhelp.com/almost30.
It's a nice balance, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Definitely
it's so powerful because I would be more like you, and having someone that is that sure of their spiritual path and sure of themselves and their relationship to God to support them in the best possible outcome is just powerful. What has been your relationship to spirituality and to divinity and to God? And was it brought into your life with the 12-step program and Julie, or what's that been like? And how have you cultivated your own relationship that's outside of those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my history with religion was not a great one. I mean, I grew up like a lot of kids. I went to Sunday school, and we would go to church occasionally, and I was just like, what is going on? I never was able to connect with it. It didn't mean anything to me.
Yes.
It just seemed annoying
Yes.
and like something I didn't really want any part of.
And usually the parents felt the same, but
Yeah,
they still
I
liked it.
completely know.
I think my parents were just doing it because that's what
Same.
you do, and I don't think they didn't.
Right after the
seem
announcements, we would
particularly
leave
connected
early.
to any of
Yes.
it either.
My
I was
mom
like,
calls
what are we
hers-
doing here?
Yes.
You know?
My mom calls herself a
Yeah.
cafeteria Catholic. She's like, I kind of just pick what I like and leave the rest. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, it's interesting. My parents now are very involved in a church in their neighborhood, but that was not the case when I was growing up. And I wasn't traumatized by it, but I just wasn't interested in it. And then, went into the world and plied my self-will with everything that I had, and, crashed into a brick wall and, had to pick myself up and put these broken pieces back together. And yes, like, recovery is where I was introduced to spiritual principles that have now become the fabric upon which I, make decisions and live my life. The primary one being that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, which is something that I had a very difficult time trying to understand or wrap my head around. But the more that I began to practice these spiritual tools that I was learning in recovery and seeing results from them, it's the seeing results part that I started to believe that there is something that exists beyond, our mere five senses to perceive. And it's just been a very loose, non-denominational, non-specific relationship with spiritual energy and spirituality in general that has grown over many years through a number of modalities. Like when I got out of treatment, I started going to yoga, and that's where I met Julie. And then I started doing meditation. And, because I'm married to Julie, we have lots of interesting teachers and gurus who pass through our house or who we've sat at the feet of. So I've spent time with many quote unquote spiritual master in all their wisdom and their flaws, and have absorbed all of that by osmosis. And I think that congeals in some kind of loose, ill-defined relationship with the unknown that gives me peace and, provides guardrails and a bit of a North Pole. But it really boils down to just having faith that what we can touch, see, hear, smell, and feel isn't all that's going on. And there's plenty of evidence to support that intelligence beyond the mind, because I am this rational person and have a certain kind of education where it's all about intellectualizing everything. When I'm able to quiet that and listen to my intuition and trust my gut and follow more ephemeral instincts, that has really provided the life that I get to lead right now. And I have to remember that because I forget that. And Julie's always like, you're not going to figure this out with your mind. Like, look at everything that we've done. Does that make logical sense to you? How do you think that this happened? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Isn't that wild?
Mm-hmm.
It's so wild. And I wish that for everyone, to have that connection enough where it's so clear there's nothing but to follow it, or you're unable to intellectualize yourself out of it.
Yes. And I think that takes a certain amount of not comparing yourself. I think when we're aware of like kind of how other people did it and what other people are doing, it becomes a little bit confusing and creates a little bit of static between you and that feeling of knowing and trust and faith. One of my last questions is about embodiment, because I feel like you have an ever evolving and very powerful relationship with your physical body. How you nourish it, how you get in tune with it, especially for your incredible feats as an athlete. I guess, what have you learned about the relationship with the body that you would like to share with our audience? I feel like for me, it's been such a key in connecting with the divine and connecting really with part of my understanding of like why I'm here, you know, like be a human on earth right now and not be so up here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the body is connected to the mind and the spirit, right? So they aren't separate things. Like I tend to think of it holistically, like how is my relationship to my body informing my relationship to my higher self, to my mental health, to my emotional state of being. Like these are not individual buckets, they all work in tandem. And how I use my body is to further my growth in those other areas. And for me, it's just, movement through endurance sports and training and all these things. They're not meditation per se, but they are meditative, and they allow me to deepen my connection with my higher self and problem solve and do all the things that we know can happen when we're in a state of elevated breath. And so it serves a great important function in that regard. And I think that it's also taught me that we're all capable of more than we believe that we are, because my body has taken me to places that I didn't think that it could take me. And if that could happen, I think that that's true for other people. And so it's expanded my capacity of potential in all areas of my life, because if I could achieve certain things with my physical body, which only operates in conjunction with my mind and my spirit and the like, then what's possible in the other areas of my life that I really don't want to look at? Where are the other growth opportunities as a father, as a husband, as a professional, as just a human being trying to be in greater service to others? And my physical pursuits have taught me that not only this idea of being more capable than we thought that we are, but that is something that cannot be fully tapped out. Like no matter how deep you go, there's always more growth. There's always more progress. And like I'm 55 now, and I can still go out, and I don't feel like, I don't know what you're supposed to feel like at 55, but I wouldn't say I feel like I'm 21, but I feel like I'm in, I don't know. I think of myself as being like, in my mid 30s probably, right? And my body's able to do things that I was doing when I was that age as well. So it's also reframed my relationship with aging and my own like kind of mortality timeline.
Yeah, powerful.
Do you think it's intuition first and then and then the mind and body follows, or do you think it's like you lead with action if you want to change your life with your body, or do you think it's rewiring of the brain? Like of all those things, if people are looking to make change in their life, do you think which one do you think leads?
Action first. 100%. So one of the mantras I learned very early in recovery was this idea of mood follows action. I was at an AA meeting, and there was something that I was going through, and I was frustrated, and I didn't want to do this thing that I knew that I needed to do, and my sponsor was like, mood follows action. And I mean that was like, must have been 1998 when he told me that, and I never forget it, and I think about it every single day. In other words, when you feel resistance in your life, whatever it is, that thing that you want to do or achieve, or that task that's in the back of your mind that's bugging you, our instinct is to say, I'll get to that when I feel like it. But as you know, often you never feel like doing it, or you're waiting forever until you feel like it. And in truth, the discomfort that you're seeking to alleviate will happen only through taking the action. So it's about getting outside of your mind and just doing the thing. And when you do the thing and you get to the other side of it, you're like, oh, I feel better. So I think action is always first. And this is a conversation that I had with the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman on the podcast, who validated it through experiments that he's done on the brain. And I think the phrase he uses is behavior first, thoughts, perceptions, and emotions follow, something like that, which is a scientific spin on mood follows action. So really the lesson is develop the capacity and the habit of just doing, like taking the action, right? So in the context of, let's say, going to the gym or something like that, like I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do it. I'll go to the gym when I feel like it. Well, why don't you just put your shoes on? Like, I can do that, just be. And then you're like, well, I put my shoes on. Like, I might as well stand up. Stand up, like it's breaking things down into tiny little things.
Yes.
And obviously you go to the gym, you're never bummed that you did. You're like, I feel so much better, right? Because you did the thing.
Yeah. Love it. Powerful. I have to say, I can say it now at the end of this, that this was like one of those moments that we were like we had to pause yesterday and be like, we're talking to Rich tomorrow. And it's just such no, truly, it's such a big moment because we've admired you for so long, and you are one of the inspirations behind us starting our show. You can tell by the pink room. It's very ritual.
Honestly.
Listen, I'm very secure in my masculinity, and I have like.
He's enjoying this chair, and I know it.
Had I known, I would have worn like a pink T-shirt. I have some pink stuff. I have a swim bag. My swim bag. I have like this mesh bag where I put all my swim stuff in, and it's pink. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I get to go to the pool and have this pink bag.
I love it.
And just like see what people.
You're
think
like
of
paradigm breaker.
Yeah.
I'm doing the thing.
Oh,
I
man.
mean, meeting you 8 years, it's so weird for me too, meeting you 8 years ago and being like, wow, podcasting's so amazing and so incredible. Being so inspired by the medium. And I had that same feeling where I was like, why isn't everyone doing this? And then being so inspired that we started ours 6 years ago, was like, whoa. And it's been something like that for me, where it's the small actions we've taken every single day that have changed. So it's so beautiful to have you on. Julie's incredible. We love watching you and your story. And it's been an honor. So last question from me. What are you really excited about right now? Like, what feels like something that's really just kind of consuming your brain, of something that you're really looking forward to bringing into the world, or something that's really motivating you right now?
The consciousness that I'm trying to inhabit right now is this idea of anything being possible. And I'm really like feeling that right now. Like, I have so much opportunity. I've worked very hard to get to a place where I can, be available for such opportunities, but I'm really seeing that those things are coming to fruition, and it just gives me this very nourished feeling. And it's about like, how do I channel that with responsibility for the highest good? In terms of specifics, we just came out with Voicing Change 2. Last year, we created this coffee table book for the podcast that has excerpts from a number of our past favorite guests with beautiful photographs and essays and the like. And we just came out with volume 2 of it. So that's new in the world, and I'm excited about that. I've got this documentary project on addiction that I'm trying to birth into the world. I don't know, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff.
It's kind of weird when you have all possibilities available. Before you want all the chances, you want all the opportunities, and then you're like, oh, I actually have a choice now. It's kind of weird. You're like, what do I?
It becomes mostly about saying no, which I'm not very good at, because like I remember well when there were nothing, nobody was calling.
Yes.
And I just wanted somebody to call,
Yes,
and I don't want to miss anything. And all the opportunities are awesome, but you can't do all of them. So it's about being really clear on like, okay, what is it that you're actually trying to do here? What is in the service to the mission,
Yes.
And what's your favorite way to take care of yourself these days?
Sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not new.
No,
It's like,
On that Casper mattress,
No,
baby.
I got the birch.
Really? Okay, upgrade. That was
Birch mattress. I just got,
Birch is
so I don't know if you guys know, I sleep
love
outside
birch.
in a tent. Right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I sleep in a tent. And for my birthday, Julie got me this glamping tent, like a proper, like big canvas
sexy.
glamping tent.
Cool.
And I have like a bed frame in there. So it's like a
yeah.
room now.
Yes.
Wow. And why?
Crazy.
For
You're
people,
fully outside.
for people that don't know, why do you sleep in a tent?
It's a long story, but the truth is, like, I struggle with sleep. Sleep's super important to me. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I feel terrible. People who claim they can go on 5 hours, I'm sure you've talked about this on the podcast,
Yes.
like how important it is. And I just really care for my sleep and need it to be protected. And I'm somebody who sleeps a lot better when it's really cold out. And Julie likes the room warm. Or at least warmer. I don't expect many people want it as cold as I want it. So we would argue in the bedroom. She's like, it's too cold, and she'd be under all these covers, and I'm on top of the covers, and neither of us were sleeping well. And we have a flat roof at our house, and one summer night, with the kids, we would go out on that roof and have a slumber party and project movies on this wall. And I fell asleep on the roof and woke up the next morning and just had the most amazing night of sleep. And I was like, that was incredible. Like, I forgot what it feels like to be outdoors. I said, I'm going to sleep again on the roof. She was like, fine, not have at it. But you wake up, I mean, we're in Southern California, so it doesn't get that cold, but it goes down into like the low 40s at night. But you'd wake up covered in all this condensation, so all wet. And so I was like, well, I need a tent if I'm going to do this. So I got it. It just kind of like
It progressed.
suddenly became this thing
Yes.
that was kind of like a joke, but I was like, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I love you, babe, but I am sleeping so much better doing this, and kind of began like that a couple of years ago, to the point now where, I've been sleeping in a tent for like over 2 years. I can't remember when I started exactly.
It's also nice to be in your own energy. I can imagine.
That's what she said too. I remember when you guys talked about it on the show. She's like, I'm doing a lot of spiritual things in my sleep.
Right.
She's like, I need the peace. And I was like, dang, that's so true. Yes.
So I mean, there's people have a lot of opinions, and there's a lot of baggage around what does that say about your marriage if you guys sleep separately? We've been together for over 20 years. We have a very healthy marriage. We have a lot of intimacy. We have our time. But the sleep thing, this is just what works for us. So
love it.
Anyway.
Love it. Anyone who thinks just like intimacy just lives in the bed, like
together,
is hilarious.
Yes.
But it's true. Well, thank you.
Thank
you so much.
No, I love what you guys are doing. I think it's really important. To provide some really good guidance to young people out there. And I appreciate you having me on, and it's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much, Rich. Again, richroll.com. The podcast is The Rich Roll Show. You can watch him on YouTube, youtube.com/richroll. Some of my favorites are his episode with Andrew Huberman, Cal Newport, and his wife.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for listening, subscribing, rating, and reviewing. It means so much to us. And thank you to our sponsors for this episode. They make this show possible. You can find more information about these incredible brands in our show notes, as well as on almost30.com. And you get some crazy Almost 30 discounts.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. We'll see you on Instagram, Almost 30 Podcast. You can subscribe on YouTube, almost30.com for anything else. And we love you.
Love you. Bye.